Okay, so this is 3.3. 3.3 is essentially the reverse or the opposite of 3.2. So in 3.2, I told you we have two parallel lines, and I know that they're parallel lines, and I'm going to take a transversal through them. 3.3 is saying, okay, I don't know that I have parallel lines, but what I do know is I have two lines cut by a transversal. And I also know that these lines or these angles, corresponding angles, add up to 180. So if they hold the properties that we talked about on the previous page, like if my alternate interior angles are congruent, and I know that, then that tells me reverse that the lines are parallel. If I know that alternate exterior angles are congruent, then that tells me that my lines are parallel. If I know that corresponding angles add up to 180, then I know that my lines are parallel. So the last section, I told you that the lines are parallel. That made those properties true. In this section, the properties are true, therefore the lines are parallel. So it's just the opposite of the previous section. It's essentially saying the same thing, but just backwards. So if two lines are cut by a transversal in such a way to form congruent corresponding angles, then they are parallel. So you're essentially taking your conditional statement and making the converse of it is what we're doing here. If two lines are cut by a transversal in such a way to form congruent alternate interior angles, then the two lines are parallel. If the two lines are cut by a transversal in such a way to form congruent alternate exterior angles, then they have to be parallel. And then the last one, if two lines are cut by a transversal in such a way to form supplementary consecutive angles, then the two lines are parallel. Okay? Is it possible to prove P and Q are parallel? If so, state the postular theorem. So it would be one of these. So if it was true, these are corresponding or consecutive angles. Consecutive angles have to add up to 180. So does 122 plus 58 add to 180? So we check that. That's 8. That's carry 1. So yes. So yes, I can prove that P is parallel to Q. Here, this whole angle right here, we would want to talk about that whole angle, 60 and 25, which is 85. This angle and this angle are alternate interior angles. Alternate interior angles have to be congruent. If this is 85 and that's 85, so 85 does equal 85, which makes my alternate interior angles congruent. Therefore, yes, P is parallel to Q. Use the diagram and the given information to determine if M is parallel to N, P is parallel to Q, or no valid conclusions can be made. If 3 is congruent to 10, so we're talking about those two angles, so I'm going to put my hand over the bottom so we don't get confused. Alternate exterior is supposed to be congruent. They're saying they are congruent. That means that M is parallel to N in this case. So a new, totally new now, 1 and 13. 1 and 13 are going over this transversal and then across to this transversal. So even if those are congruent, it doesn't matter. That could be congruent to that, but that, since they're going over to me transversal, I can't make no valid conclusion. I can't make no valid conclusion. That makes no sense. I cannot make a valid conclusion. 1 is congruent to 4. Okay, sorry, 4 is congruent to 11. So this angle and this angle. So here's the thing. 4 is congruent to 11. 4 and 11 are consecutive interior angles. Consecutive interior angles are supposed to add up to 180. So if they're congruent to one another, the only time they would be congruent to one another and add up to 180 would be if they're 90 degrees. So I cannot make a valid conclusion because there's not enough information there. We would want that to say that they are supplementary. 12 is congruent to 13, so I'm going to put my hand over this. 12 and 13 are alternate interior. Alternate interior is supposed to be congruent. It's saying that they're congruent. So that makes P parallel to Q. So yes, P would be parallel to Q. And then the last one, 3 and 14. So we're talking about 3 and 14. 3 and 14 go across too many transversals, so we can make no valid conclusion there. Okay, that is all for 3.3 notes. So what I want for you to do is work on 3.3 homework, then work on your project, and work on the supplemental sheets if you have time.